G'day, Keithy here. Thanks for joining me again. Glad to see you. So if you've seen on the Instagram or the Chilling with Keithy page, you'll probably noticed that I'm doing a dual battery install at the moment for a friend. So I've started doing that install, but I'm going to explain, is sort of make a two-part series of this. What's involved in actually making your own dual battery setup. It's not beyond an average sort of DIY type bloke or woman, as you may well be. So don't think that you've got to go to an auto electrician to get them to do your dual battery system. I'm no electrician myself, but I know my way around 12 volt well enough, I think, to get things happening. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to do a little bit of planning before you do get into this dual battery system thing. So you need to plan how you're going to do it, where you want your batteries, all things like that, how you're going to run your wires, what you're going to need. And there's a good way of doing it, and I'll explain how I do it, and then maybe you can, take some things from that if you're considering doing one for yourself. So I've got a notepad. It's got heaps of cool stuff in it. And in this notepad, and I'll show you this after, this is actually a wiring diagram for this install that I'm doing. I'll take a photo of that and I'll put it up in the corner there so you can have a bit of a look while I yabber on. So basically that wiring diagram is a very important part of the dual battery setup. And if you don't have it, you're sort of just winging it as you go. You can get a lot of things from a wiring diagram, even if you're not an engineer or anything. And I'm not an engineer either. What it'll tell you is, okay, how many batteries you've got, what kind of charger you've got, how many outlets from your charger, how many connections you've got, how many fuses you're gonna need, a bus bar, things like that. So you can design this yourself very easily. You know how many outlets you might want in your dual battery system. So maybe you're running 2 fridges. Maybe you want Anderson plug connections for your fridges. If you've got solar coming in, Anderson plug's a great idea for them as well. So you can go through the list there and work out how many things you need to get. So when you go into your auto parts store or auto electrical store or whatever it is, wherever you get your bits and pieces from, you're going to have some idea. You can write yourself out actual list out. So you can go off your wiring diagram and you can go, all right, so I'm going to need battery terminals for the auxiliary battery. I'm going to need, X amount of spade connectors to go into a fuse block or inline fuses, or however you're going to do that there. And one little tip I've always used with dual battery installs, this is not my first rodeo. For the ground, I always use a bus bar because it's so simple. You can just basically run one earth from your chassis up to this bus bar, and then you can run 1,000,000 earths off that without having to have like 400 wires going down to the chassis. So that's a good idea right there. It's like a common ground for everything, and you can use a nice gauge wire, nice thick wire, and that makes life easier there. Fuse blocks are another good idea. So similar to a bus bar, with a fuse block, you run a decent sized cable to your fuse block, and then you can run heaps of little tiny ones out to your outlets or voltage gauges or whatever it is you're running, and obviously with fuses in there. And that makes the wiring install really neat because you don't need to have lots of little wires going all over the shop. So it keeps it really clean. One big one and a couple of little ones here and there. So that's really good. It can also point out how many connectors, switches, relays, whatever you may need. So from that diagram, I ended up with that shopping list. So the shopping list, I'm not going to read every part of it out, but just to give you some example, do you know how much wire you're going to need, what size, what gauge wire you're going to need, depending on where you mount your battery. So this install I'm doing is in a D40 Navara, and my mates requested that the batteries go in the back of the vehicle, in the tray. So I know that I'm going to need to run a lot of wire up to the back of the tray of this thing, and it's not just a dual battery install. So this is actually a tri-battery install. So there's going to be 2 auxiliary batteries and the start battery. So it's a fairly complex install. It's not just a matter of hooking up one battery and away you go, because when you're linking 12 volt batteries, there is a way that you need to do it in order to prevent one battery doing all the work and one battery not really doing bugger all. And I'll explain that when I do wire them up. But for example, I said, okay, I'm using 8 BNS wire. If you know what that is, that's 8mm square wire basically. from the front to the back. Everything needs a fuse. So if you're running a wire from the front of your vehicle to the back of your vehicle, if that's where you're going to mount your auxiliary battery, you'll put a fuse at the crank battery where you've connected onto it for your auxiliary setup, and then way up the back just before your battery charger, you're going to put another fuse there as well. And fuses are to protect wires, not devices. So you say your charger's a 20 amp charger, and you got, say that 8 BNS wire that I'm running is 8 mil square. It's capable of 50 amps odd, and then a little bit. So I'm going to put a 50 amp fuse on that at the start and at the end, and that'll protect the wiring, because wires create fires. That's what it is. If your device, be it a stereo or a fridge or whatever, is causing a fire in your car, there's something wrong with the fridge. But your aim is to protect the wires, because the wires can only deliver so much current. They're only rated to deliver so much current. Some of the other things I'm putting in this install, this is pretty cool. So I'm going to install a momentary switch, which will activate a voltage gauge. So when my mate presses this momentary switch, bim, little voltage gauge will light up. So I know I need to get some spade connectors for the voltage gauge and for the switch. A couple of battery trays, I need to get them. Conduit to run your wire through. You got to think of that. You're not just going to run positive wires attached to your chassis, because if they rub through, they're going to arc out. Battery terminal fuses. I got a box of fuses. I've got my bus bar, some heat shrink. That's a very important. P-clamps. They're very good to run when you're running wires around. Just keeps them organised whatever you're running them around. And then I had to make a trip to Bunnings as well, so I had to get some timber, because I'm making little custom boxes for this install, so that I can have like a switch panel, I guess, on a custom little carpeted box. It's going to look pretty cool when it's all done. And I can mount the Anderson plug to that as well. And I've sort of got to design this with what's already in the tray. So there's a set of, it's like 2 big drawers in the tray of this ute already, so I've got to work around that. I may need to move them even. I can foresee that being a fun job. So this is all a part of the planning to do the dual battery setup. So often what will happen too is you'll have this lovely shopping list here, and you'll make your way into your auto parts store and whatnot. You'll come home, and then halfway through the job you go, shit, I need extra this or extra that, or whatever it may be. It's always the case, unless you actually work at an auto electrical outlet. You're not going to have access all the time to everything that you're going to need. So you can, it's okay to forget things, as long as you've got a way to duck up to the shops and grab some more, be it heat shrink. Normally it's heat shrink or spade connectors, or even screws or nuts and bolts. I've noticed that in previous installs I've gone, oh shit, maybe half a dozen, and it's not much. It's normally only the tiny little things, but half a dozen self-tapping screws or something like that is short, and you go through your cupboard and you try and find everything you can find to finish the job off, and you go, all right, I've got to make that trip up the road. So there's just some things to consider when you're doing a dual battery setup. So yeah, I mean, even things like grommets. On this install, I'm actually putting hinge trays so you can access fuses and stuff. So the fuses and everything will be all hidden inside a little box. And I'm going to put hinges and a latch on it so you can open it up. Oh yeah, fuse number 6 is blown for the fridge outlet or whatever. And then you can get in and replace. So it'll look nice and tidy. It'll look really neat. And then obviously it's still accessible. And this is going to be the same with the battery tray, because I'm going to have to put the batteries on one side of this ute and the outlets on the other, because of where the fridge is going to go. Otherwise I won't have enough room to do all of that on the one side. So yeah, very cool install. I'm looking forward to getting into this. I don't know how long it's going to take. Hopefully only take a day or so. Just sort of in between the school runs. Hopefully I can knock it up pretty quick, if all goes to plan. And that's another thing you need to budget for too, when you're doing a dual battery install, or any install really. Often things don't go right and something will go wrong. Give yourself some time to do that. Don't put pressure on yourself to finish it in one day, because good things take time. So I hope I've inspired some of you guys to get out there and plan your dual battery install. I'm looking really forward to this, so stick around for part 2. And if it's going to be a big job, I might even make a part 3 of it, but hopefully only a part 2 to finish this off. They're really simple in the long run. I'll leave this, my wiring diagram for this install up for a couple of seconds at the end of the video, just if you want to have a detailed look, and then you can pause it and have a bit of a look. I'm no electrical engineer by any means, but I know I can understand it. I've got fuses, I've got switches, blah, blah, blah. And I know how to make sense of it, and that's all that matters. But the best advice I can give you if you're going into it, make sure you've got a fuse for everything. Everything that has power going to it needs to be fused appropriately. So if your wire's really skinny, you're going to need really tiny fuse of 5 or 10 amp. If you've got thick wire, then you can get away with, a 20 amp fuse or something like that. But also think about what you're going to be powering too. So if you're powering something that's going to be, that it needs 20 amps, you don't need that thick wire for something that's going to use 20 amps. But if you're going to power a 2 kilowatt inverter, well then hello, you're going to need about 200 amp fuses and whatnot. And this is where, when the fuses start to get up in size, it gets to a point where it might be better even running a circuit breaker. Bit of food for thought there. Righty guys, I've babbled on enough. Don't forget Chilling with Keithy, and also the Instagram. Hey, flash. Go over at Keithy_wager for the Instagram, and Chilling with Keithy on Facebook, and say g'day. You can send me messages and do all that kind of cool stuff. I'm getting up there. Thank you very much to you guys who have said, hey Keithy, you should get on Instagram, because now I'm there, and it's all because of you. So I'm going to crack that whip, go on there and post a few things, probably a bit more often than I have been. Technology is not my friend. I sort of don't get on the phone and whatnot too often, but I'll get on there. I'll make the exception for you guys. What do you reckon? Alrighty, take it easy. Also, we're nearing 1,000. Yay! Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll get over that 1,000. And thank you very much. We'll see you very soon, guys. Take it easy. Catch you later.